Europe, who both work as individual artists and who also produce the work of others through festivals and a variety of platforms. On February 6th, we have Rasa Smite, who runs the Riga Center for Art and Technology, and who is also a phenomenal visual artist. And on April 3rd, we have Margot Zalite, who is a festival director and one of the favorites in festival in Germany. So those will all be here on Mondays from 4 to 5:30 at Space in person and virtual. So definitely put them on your calendar and check them out. And they are co-sponsored by the Concordia Theater Arts Department and by CISIC, the Center for Interdisciplinary Fancy Things. So a much longer acronym. So yeah, check that information out on the website. So I'm going to give a brief introduction to the fabulous brains that we have in the room today, Beck Berger and VK Preston. And then I'm going to pass it off to them to exchange. We're here until 5:30, so we have time to listen to them for about an hour and then about half an hour for questions. But I don't think these two would protest if things got fluid at some point. So if you have a burning thought or question, then please do bring it up, whether you're in person or on Zoom. We want to hear from you. So Beck Berger is an Australian curator, artist, and creative producer based in Riga, Latvia. She is currently artistic director of the New Theatre Institute of Latvia and curator of the International Festival of Contemporary Performance, Homo Novus. Originally from Narm, Melbourne, Australia, she has worked in festivals across the globe, such as American Realness, Dance Massive, Darwin Festival, Fierce Festival, and Forest Fringe. As a curator, she has co-initiated projects such as Critical Futures, Convergence, La Discorso, and Possible Futures Forum. Independent of her curatorial work, she has been collaborating as a dance dramaturg with choreographer James Batchelor since 2017. Their work has toured over 20 countries, including such contacts as Centre Pompidou, Tanz im August, December Dance, Dance Massive, Sofiensaale, and Aerowaves 19 Artists in Springford in Paris. If I'm putting that whole sentence together correctly. So welcome, Beck, very excited.
Thanks.
And throughout the whole series, we're putting one of these international artists, producers in conversations with a Concordia faculty member. And today we have VK Preston, who is an assistant professor of history at Concordia. Their research draws from approaches in performance historiography, which I hope I'm saying right, yes, with particular focus on dance. VK works across histories of the performing arts in order to address cultural histories of practice, embodiment, and stigma. This research analyzes histories of the emotions and the senses in intersectional analyses of race, gender, disability, and cultural privilege. So these are two amazing brains who also have extensive professional experience in performance in worldwide festival circuits and beyond. And so really excited to hear you guys talk about that challenge of balancing your own individual creative research practice, artistic practice, with the act of supporting the work of others through festivals and other works, but also the kind of complicated net of challenges that emerges in your professional practices in general, whether academic or industry-based, as it were. So thanks, guys.
Cool.
Right.
Thanks, Mo. Thanks for inviting us.
Mo, you're amazing.
Should I start? I'm going to start a slideshow. So there is some additional bits and pieces going on in the background. Now, if I can turn it now.
Oh. So there's a request to enable translation, which we'll get on.
I don't think that's my computer.
Okay. Cool beans.
So what you'll be seeing is a whole lot of work from the last 10, 15 years. Happy to explain it if anything sparks joy.
Well, I'm already, okay, I was thinking about immersive when I heard about this work. And can you tell us a little bit, what artist producer would activate for you, but also this idea of what is the public doing? You know, here the public is swimming, and you made work for swimmers.
Yeah, I'll quickly come back to this work, which is called Compositions for the Pool. So this is a work that's me and the composer Morgan Higginbotham created in 2018, and it was me and Morgan had the same childhood swimming pool, Prahran Pool, Prahran Aquatic Centre in on the lands of the Wurundjeri people in a place called South Yarra. And I learnt how to swim in 2017 while on tour. I had never learnt how to swim, and it just opened up this whole different way of seeing the world, no? An act that most people learn much earlier.
Also the Aussies did.
It just never got embodied before that moment. And so while on tour, he also works with James Batchelor, the dancer, choreographer I work with. We would go swimming, and it started becoming this practice. And then it was like, how do we heighten this thing, no? How can we shift something that becomes, if you're a swimmer or any swimmers out there, you know you have a community, right? If you got 7 o'clock every morning, you might not be friends with anyone, but you've seen them every single day for however long time. So trying to find a way of interrupting that. So we created a composition to while you listen, a composition you listen to while you swim. All from Founds in a month-long residency in the pool over summer, which was great. So swimming morning and evening. And we created then this composition electronically, taking all the different sounds of movement of water, of the mechanics also of the pool. And then we worked with an amateur symphony to create that composition into classical notation. Or 7 members of the local amateur symphony. There's not many amateur symphonies in Australia. It's not a regular thing, but we just happen to have one close by, the Stonington Symphony. So yeah, it's great. You can actually listen to it online if you go to lapprojects.com or .org. You can download it if you've got some underwater headphones, or you can also just listen to it online as well. It still exists. It has been only transferred once to a pond in Latvia as a part of a classical music festival in the forest. And it was remarkable to kind of witness actually this translation of this audio monument to my childhood pool in a pond in the middle of nowhere. So, I mean, it was a great project. And if you have underwater headphones, I would recommend.
Well, I'll get them just for that. I mean, what I love, even with that one piece, is the sense of how, like, so often festivals are something somewhat transactional, right? Like, there's a program, you buy a ticket, you go to that particular thing, it's a certain number of minutes, and the kind of work that you're doing as an artist producer, and I already have some beautiful ideas from you in just a few minutes, but is all of that becomes in question, right? That we might arrive in another way, we might experience one another in another way, we might experience our own motion, our ways of hearing and feeling and being in relation to one another in another way, in part because of the kinds of attention that you bring to the entirety of those sets of exchanges. And I met you through your New York work, but I know that this is what you do.
Yeah. I mean, for me, I think it's that thing of like contemporary practice allows us to exercise a different way of like practicing society or being together. Like I really genuinely believe that it's not easy, no, to change the world. It's not easy to imagine how to be together differently. But if we've got frames of practice or interventions that allows us to exercise that, well, then maybe it becomes a little bit easier with a bit more practice and a bit more practice. Maybe we can see the world a little differently and each other, or that person that we've ignored forever, or that motion that never happened. So this is a wonderful, this is going to go back 1 second. This is the beautiful Keith Hennessy, who is an incredible choreographer based in San Francisco. He came and joined us for the 2021 Homo Novus Festival. And my invitation was that I was like, Keith, can you make a ceremony for us? A ceremony of queer joy and togetherness to close the festival. You've got 2 weeks, like the whole festival. Don't really have big budgets, but you can have an open studio and just see what happens. And he brought almost 300 of us in relation to each other over an hour and a half, which ended up, I mean, this felt quite risky, you know? Do you remember 2011? Like holding hands and being in proximity to a whole bunch of strangers.
And I'll just flag a little bit 2021, because the performing arts has been hit so hard by COVID, and all of these questions that we're talking about, how do we relate to each other, right? In some strange way, we're all having to learn that from the ground up together. But I think in your idea of like festivals rehearse possibility in ways that allow us to become capable of imagining new thresholds of possibility. So a ceremony by Keith on the cusp of COVID is a re-entrance, right?
Yeah, but a festival's temporal, and that's what's magical about them, no? Like, it's not forever. It's like 10 days of like super accelerating possibility. It cannot happen all the time in its intensity. We would all explode. It's not possible. But I guess what I really enjoy about the format of meeting a festival, curating a festival, is that yes, you can go to 9, 10, which we should always just stay at 5 or 4, no? But we can be at 9 and 10. 11. We can kind of suspend the normal realities of time or exercise or togetherness for a period of time. And then hopefully that trickles, which changes our experience for the rest of the year. Then with the longing of, this time, no? I think we've all got these festivals in mind. Well, I know I do, of like, oh, I just love going to Fies Festa, or I love going to Sant'Angelo, because I know it's not my normal life, nor would I want it to be my normal life at all. But in those moments, you can kind of have this accelerated, exaggerated experience. And I think that's what makes festivals so special.
And an amazing medium for someone like you. And you're yoking it to things, though, right? So we were talking a little bit before about this idea that is going to stay in my brain for a long time about methodologies of rest and how you learned that idea, and how you can turn events like this into links with supporting folks who are traveling unwillingly and directly yoking into political events as we live them now.
Yeah, I mean, I think as a curator, you can do a lot of things under the guise of art, which, in a moment now of war, you can redirect resources. So like, this is also referring to like the fact that we made sure, looking at our resources for the festival this year, was that we were trying to redirect as much into Ukraine as possible. We also were able to invite some Belarusian producers to, again, take some time to be with us, to take some rest, that these possibilities are not necessarily available to these artists, all the time. And, we were very lucky to have also Igor Shugalev, who is a Belarusian dissident, and actually some of his friends were those producers that we were able to reunite and bring them together also in Riga. So I think there are lots of political action that can happen under this guise, of the festival. It doesn't have to be, well, I guess I'm not interested in just this transactional marketplace of buying and selling. And I think also it's the context. Yeah, sure, I love Castellucci. I'm not going to get wrong, but in terms of the impact that a work of Castellucci can do, and the size and scale of it is, or 6 other smaller interventions, well, there's a political reimagination that can happen by shifting that resource as well. I think it's 80% curating resource, 20% curating art. If we think about funding applications and connections with embassies, or the kind of actual festival making, the art curation is actually quite small. Everything else is the big part, in my experience anyway. So I just want to quickly pay attention to these incredible figures. So these are our teenage curators. So we have 10 teenagers, 5 from Latvia and 5 from Norway, from Trondheim, who have come together over the last year to become festival curators. They already did it, so this is the final weekend of the festival this year, which they curated, and they're just about to the next festival, which is part of Bastard Festival in Trondheim, which they've done such a good job. It's so exciting actually to see.
Whoa.
Be like, wow, they've been doing this for like a year, Most of them are, between 15 and 18. There's a lot else going on in their lives, and yet they've become these phenomenal curators, And again, a resource redirection, This was a European project about engaging youth, and a lot of the other projects that came out of this resourcing is much more still great activities like cinema clubs or whatever, but we were like, no, we want to change the world, I'm fairly sure that these 10 people you see in this image are going to change the landscape of performing arts in Europe. Like, it just feels like it's palpable that these incredible young people can do it. And anyway, I just wanted to point this out. The Shakedown, you can check out their website, theshakedown.com, and see all the work that they're doing as well. Now this is a bit more festival photos, I think. Yeah, that's our team back in the office. Yeah.
Well, that's actually right on cue, because I wanted to ask about Baltic Takeover.
So this is the Baltic Takeover, baltictakeover.com, if you want to see a little bit more about it. Yeah, I mean, the Baltic Takeover is a festival that will be happening in June of this year, June 7 to 11, in Helsinki. And the concept around this festival, I mean, it's not part of our normal remit. It's definitely an extra, quite an extra big project that we've taken on, but kind of coming into this role in 2021, like kind of, I had this transition time in 2020, but coming into the role in 21, I really noticed that there wasn't such incredible exchanges in performing arts, visual arts absolutely, but across the Baltic borders. And I have had the previous privilege of working with Gintare in Lithuania, in Vilnius, as a part of New Baltic Dance. And I was just like, wow, we need to create more curiosity for each other, no? Like, instead of flying to Berlin to go to a festival, you know, I was going to festivals in Vilnius and not seeing any of my particularly emerging artists around seeing work. So I invited Curators in Estonia and the Lithuanian Dance Information Center to embark on this exercise of framing our own performing arts landscape. So we kind of took a different direction of negotiating with venues such as Kiasma, which is one of the largest contemporary performing arts visual arts centers, Madhouse, Helsinki, Virustira, Anantalo, and Eskos. And I basically asked them directly, would you give us your space? No questions asked, no money exchanged, all your production, all the things that doesn't cost money, like marketing or publicity, things that already exist, kind of, they're paid by someone all the time, you know, there's not this extra cost. And give it to us to curate our own festival on our own lens, on our own terms. And I think, to everyone's surprise, everyone was really into it. And that happened kind of the start of 21, and then, was it the start of 21? Yeah, I guess it was the start of 21. And then all of 22, we visited each other's contexts. So we co-curated the artists together. So there are 3 artists or artist groups from each country involved. So Estonia, Lithuania, and Latvia. And we met each other in our own contexts and exchanged practice. And I feel like in the last year, we've created this cohort of curiosity and love and care, knowing that we have this mission of making this festival together in Helsinki in June, but actually the kind of desire of kind of breaking down these borders, I think it's kind of already happened, because we have the curiosity, we have this intense desire to be together. And I mean, I hope it can happen in other cities. Maybe Montreal, you want to be taken over. I mean, we like this idea that we can take over, that it's about being on our terms. And I think that's like, and yeah, creating a lens. I mean, I think if people don't necessarily understand the lens in Europe, like it can, between East and Western Europe, the lenses can be, presenting a French work in a festival is not surprising, no, but the amount of Latvian works that get presented in those same festivals is a lot less to do with population, but a lot to do with also the access to being in other festivals, or the desire of curators to come and to look at our work as well. But we're changing that, so it's also fine. This is the start of something new. Yeah.
When you sort of think of resources in terms of like taking them on, rearranging them, developing ways in which people meet each other in different ways, I fell very much in love with American Realness, in part through meeting you. I think incredible choices of artists, the decisions to have with the Native American Realness conversations, Indigenous artists speak back to missed choices within programming, that like had reverberations over months and years. So it's so deeply about conversations and the centering of trans and queer art. So I wanted to sort of ask you about how that like intentional shifting of conversation and how the curating, not just of a work, but of, I love this, cohorts of curiosity, that it might be a writer alongside an art producer, alongside a radio DJ, and the sense that you haven't forsaken possibilities of communication at all.
Yeah, I mean, I want to point out that American Realness is not mine.
I know.
This is the wonderful Ben Pryor, who founded that festival. I got to see Ben in New York just last week, which was really wonderful. And he did that for 10 years. And when we talk about, I'll just briefly mention it because it was, in terms of resources, it was, one of the very slim situation, but yet the impact that had on so many artists' careers is, I think at one time Ben tried to do the figures, and it was something like the direct result of being presented in American Realness made artists well over $1 million over a year. Really, like, in a beautiful Dana Michelle from here in Montreal. Like, I remember her premiere of Mercure George at American Realness, and it was like, holy crap, like there was these presenters like basically getting out checkbooks. Like it was just this thing that I'd never seen before. But yeah, it was incredible, the curation of this. It was also a very slim resourcing, financially, emotionally. I think we can all of us who are internally, and I think it's sometimes externally, you could see it as well. We were doing it on the sniff of an oily rag. And I think it's amazing that it happened for 10 years, but I don't think it was sustainable in the end for all those reasons, no? And I think sometimes there are these movements and these moments that can only happen in a precise amount of time, because anymore it just becomes totally impossible. And I forgot the start of the question because I wanted to explain realness.
I was just, my brain just did this thing because I was on their website for a second and it said Americanist realness is dead. And I was like, and then also,
the conversations around, First Nations artists. Yeah, I mean, this was, that was particularly the year, it was this controversy with Latifah Labasi and a work of theirs, which involved a Native American headdress being worn by a non-Native American. And I think it was quite remarkable what happened after that. So Ben dropped the show with quite a large, it was a co-production with MoMA PS1, just so you know. So it still happens. And then resulted in this quite incredible statement from Ben, being like, I got it wrong. What are the ways that we can now think about, not fixing it, can't be fixed, no, it's happened, but what are the ways that we can then go, okay, I can see where we went wrong, how do we then fix it? And then Ben, to his own credit, did that. I mean, Ben also got criticized at the early realness around African-American artists being represented in the program, on trans artists. Like, I think what was remarkable about realness times is that Ben really took on these criticisms in this positive sense of going, yes, actually I can see that program, I can shift it, let's look at it more and more and more. I think I obviously have a very different situation in Latvia, and in terms of when we talk about First Nations artists, for example, there, of course we have rich traditions of Latvians for thousands of years, but there are no recognized First Nations people in this area. But it doesn't mean that I don't think we should have First Nations voices in the program. And I think we just passed Latai and Brian. This year we had Latai, who is a Tongan Australian, coming to speak also about, somewhere back there, did one performance, which is around basically that, in terms of climate change, when we talk about Pacific Islanders, that they are some of the most vulnerable folks out there because climate change is affecting them more than the rest. She worked with beautiful artist Brian Fatava, who was Samoan Australian, and they ran our festival school this year. So looking at how we can create monuments from a First Nations perspective, so not necessarily built monuments, but how can we undo the city to also look at the monuments of our bodies, of the bodies of water, of the lands. And particularly it was important for me at the time to invite them to hold this space around monuments, because at the very same time, Latvia got rid of all the Soviet monuments. So from the start of very soon after the start of the war until November, all Soviet monuments were demolished. So, and kind of the biggest one, which was this 40-meter high monument called the Victory Monument, was the name, toppled like days before the festival started. We were watching it live from like we were watching it live on TV from the technical desk of like the festival center, just waiting for this thing to fall, this 40-meter high thing that represented so many things that no longer, well, should have never been there, but represented. So also having these First Nations voices coming in and offering this different perspective, even though, you know, in terms of Pacific Islanders, there are very few in Latvia. I know that there's at least 3, but we're talking about representation of a migration or of folks visiting, folks coming in. It's a very different landscape. So, you know, in Canada, much like Australia, there's been lots of immigration. There's lots of migrations over the last, how long have you been colonized?
Oh, well,
So
multiple waves, but you know,
since
400,
since the one on the coin, because Australia, it happened in 1788. That, you know, since then there's been lots of different migrations of folks from war, folks coming from other places around the world. In Latvia, it hasn't happened in that same way. So we would talk about colonizations. Latvia has been occupied and colonized many times in the last thousands of years. So also the city, the makeup of the city is very different. And actually, when we talk about a multiculturalism or a diversity, it's different on the ground. So where I'm sure there's lots of Pacific Islanders living here in Montreal or in Canada, there's not the same representation of those voices or First Nations voices in the greater makeup of the city and the country.
I was just also thinking about, as you walk through this, you were talking about a definition that you've recently come up with of dramaturgy that I thought was lovely. And it seems to me that part of what you're doing all the way through this is dramaturgical work and thinking. And I love the idea too of the festival school.
This is not my idea. I want to credit, this is not mine. This is a beautiful inheritance from previous curators. There's always been festival schools, and there always will be festival schools. Previous festival school holders have been people like Contact Gonzo has done the festival school before. Who else was there? There's been, now I'm forgetting. I think Waleed Rad helped do the festival school once. So there is this tradition of the festival school, and that's always come through the festival. So Gundiga also curated different festival schools, and that was one of her most cherished moments in the festivals. And so I, of course, also love the idea of inviting, I mean, it's a great invitation actually, of just being like, so we have this money and we don't know what a school is. You can define what the school is, and we just make it happen. So in my first year at the festival, I invited Terika Hapuja, who is a Finnish artist and academic based in NYU, or was when we were working together. I think she's still there. And she wanted to walk across Latvia. So she walked from Sēsis to Sigulda, so those who know Latvia know that distance, and with 15 artists, both locally and internationally. And it came out of the fact that we were trying to curate the school in COVID times. We're like, how can we make an international festival school where we can make it no matter what COVID conditions? And I'm like, they could be walking outside and camping. And luckily at the time there was actually no restrictions, but yeah, it was that thing of, that was the place that we got with Terika, and then also with Brian and Latai, it was again, let's focus on the monuments. So yeah, each year it's actually a really, as a curator, a wonderful format to go, what would a school look like for you? I don't know what a school is. Yeah.
There's a request in the chat to minimize this slideshow so they can see your lovely faces a little bit more.
Sorry.
If we're talking about different
I don't know
things. But I also
can get rid of
wanted to interject request recently. We have tons of time still. But I'm curious as for both of you, like how your experience and lens as artists and folks who have had their own creative practice, how that informs these structural and curatorial initiatives and frameworks. So I just wanted to put that bug in while we're doing that as well. But bring the slideshow back up whenever it's relevant. But there was just a request from the chat that they wanted to see your lovely faces.
I wonder if we can somehow like put us next to the faces and the slideshow. I don't know if that's technically possible.
Like pin the things. Can we pin? Thank you. Can we pin their faces next to the slideshow? Is that a thing that we can do, or spotlight?
And it's just the people on Zoom can decide how big the slideshow is. If it's like the cursor across.
I see.
Otherwise, the current slideshow will.
It's the whole thing. That's the whole thing. So that's the option. Apparently, it seems.
So do I put the slideshow back on? I mean, you've seen all the slides like twice now. And we can just talk.
Yeah,
And then maybe I'll show a video.
that would be
sounds great.
amazing. Yeah.
Should I show the video now? And then maybe we'll get a texture of, so I just want to show you the best of the festival. 1 second. This is so stressful doing it on camera. Okay, here we go.
I can also. Yeah, Mark, you had a question?
Yeah, it's the festival that I curate, which is the International Festival of Contemporary Theatre Homo Novus, New Human.
Every other year in Riga, Latvia.
Every year.
Just kidding. Sorry.
Perfect. Right.
All about us.
So we also had a work at LMS.
Carry the poster with your hands up.
Grounds, you know, they have a theatre in their complex, so they can work there, having integrated sign one of the first times in life. Like inviting the audience and the work.
Also talking about a definition for you of dramaturgy, having to do with being that audience. And I've been thinking about this idea of research spectatorship because there's so much emphasis on the work, and you're shifting that emphasis. It's the audience. Yeah,
for me, like, so, you know, I work as a dance dramaturg with the choreographer James Batchelor. We've worked together since 17. I have zero training in this. No, I don't. You know, I guess it came about with me being a producer and then being a creative eye, and then it slowly evolved to being like, I actually hate producing. don't like being an independent producer. I like being creative, and then it evolves. And we call it dramaturgy now because it's the most equivalent word we can find. I guess it is. But the idea that as a dramaturg, that I'm the audience in the room from the get-go. So, I think all of us can agree we see work in which us, as an audience, you're not considered. The artwork could happen without you, right? And for me, that's the thing that I'm really trying to interrogate. How, at all times, can there be the audience in the room, like asking for the logic, asking for the invitation, asking for the tension, asking for the agitation, that balance of being an audience, no? And so I think working with James, and it's been such a pleasure making work with him and continuing to make work with him, because I get to test that out. No, how can you be the audience and trying to be all the audiences, not just me, the audience, but all audience. I can't say I'm always the best at it, but I think for me, that's the approach. I don't know how else to do it. And I think, more often than not, when I'm dissatisfied by a work that I see, it's because I didn't need to be there as an audience. And I think that's sometimes the biggest trap that performing artists can fall into, because I think, the live moment is that, that triangle of the scenography, the audience, and the action, right? Is that the definition? Oh, I'm not an academic, but yeah.
But I think as soon as it goes without saying, then we're usually stuck, right? Yeah. And so there's this moment when you realize that there's a theater, or you realize that there's a way of seeing, or, we talked about that piece, Super Night Shot, you realize that the piece has already happened. You realize that you're thrown, that shift, anagnosis, whatever you want to call it, that recognition has to not be fixed.
Yeah. We all just want to be seen, right? Hopefully it's actually us, the body or our identity. Hopefully we are seen, on stage because we see ourselves, but also just being simply an audience member. We want to be like in the live moment, to be acknowledged that we are part of this. This cannot happen without us. Whether you're seated in an audience in a pros arch, it's still possible. I think when you're not seen, it's like what's
that? Rehearsing is a social relation, and if the work is trying to change social relations, can it do so if it refuses to acknowledge the presence of those who've come to share the moment? And you keep recrafting it, which I love.
I mean, I think it's about exercising it, no? Like, this is going to sound really stupid, but I'm happy to share it. I had this moment in New York, it was about 6 years ago during Realness, where I was in a yoga studio and finally understood the word practice, the concept of practice being practice, right? It doesn't finish. And it sounds really stupid, but it would just hit me all of a sudden of like, wow, we have to keep doing this. Like, we can't stop. Like, it has to, there's no end goal. Like it's always going to be, we have to be responsive and practicing how we can do this better. And the conditions are always going to change. So we have to keep practicing. Practice is practice. Like just this absurd moment in yoga. But I finally understood the word.
But it's really galvanizing what you're speaking to. And I think it applies in the many ways that we practice. It applies if you're practicing as a pedagogue. It applies if you're practicing, in just being present in a body that's shaken by what we're living right now. How do we come to that over and over again without getting bored, repeating the structure of refusal or trauma or
all those things. What's shit going there?
So post-COVID, what are you seeing? You were just at APAP, which is this Association of Presenters internationally. What are you seeing is what you're practicing? What has to shift given what we've lived?
Yeah, it's interesting. So I'm an ISPA fellow. So I was in New York just last week, going to the International Symposium of Performing Arts. And what I found quite interesting was it feels like it's the same. And I feel like I made promises to everyone in 2020 and 2021 that we were going to be different. It feels like what I'm feeling and hearing from many colleagues and friends and myself is that we've actually accelerated our practice. It's it's really intense, where we promised in 2020 to be, kinder and softer to each other, to do less. I feel like we've come back and doing more. I feel like I saw a lot of burnout of colleagues last year. So actually, for me, it's like this commitment to this year, I'm really trying to practice less. How do we do less? I don't know. I don't know, because everything feels really urgent. But I think for me, thinking about this next year is like, how can we consolidate and try and make more connections so things can happen independently of just forming kind of these structures or orbits, these constellations that can happen independently. But yeah, I mean, this year it's like I have fallen a little bit into that trap thinking about the curation of the next year, because we're doing more than more than ever before. But again, just feeling everything feeling so urgent now, like with the war, with inflation, with cost of living crisis, with what's happening in Iran, like everything just feels really urgent. Like we cannot be soft and still. And I say this at the same time as someone who has been saying to many friends, you've got to put the oxygen mask on before helping others. So
and you're like,
I'm a total contradiction. I haven't figured that out yet, but thinking constantly about, actually, I think we have all these urgent things, yes, but I think we also have to figure out what is putting the oxygen mask on now, because I think what it was before is really different, right? I think before pandemic time, I think what pandemic times, is that what we're calling it? I don't know. What pandemic times taught us was that we had all these certainties that were actually never really certain. Like we thought they were, but actually they were often exploitative. They were often ignoring lots of people that should have not been ignored. Like these structures were not maybe great, but they felt certain. Now it's like, I don't know if you know, I just feel like the future feels really unstable constantly. And there's something interesting in that, but also that thing of like, can we do what we're planning to do in a year's time? I really don't want to come up with a plan B and plan C and plan D like we did in 2020 and 2021, but maybe we have to. I don't know. That's not an answer. That's just a whole lot of confusion.
No, but I think a couple of the things that will stick with me from this conversation include that methodologies of rest, include that cohort of curiosity, and yes, it's unstable, and we don't know how to continue to exhaust making multiple plans, because at some point it's going to drive us completely around the bend. But you talked about having like sections that move of their own accord and can unfold of their own accord. In some sense, it's a paradigm shift maybe in how we allow things to decenter. And I think that's so key to how you program.
Yeah, I think that's the aim. I don't know if it always works now, but the aim to try and create these. It's also like, I was talking to Dan Dorr yesterday, who I'd love to program. If you don't know Dan Dorr, look up Dan Dorr, an incredible artist originally from Australia, but now based in the UK. Talking about how we made accessibility sexy in Latvia, I feel like, over the last 2 years, which has created then, it's not that we are the only ones creating accessible structures, but many other performing arts institutions and visual arts institutions making accessibility just part of the paradigm. So it's also about maybe trying to create these structures or catalysts or making it super sexy, making things sexy so that other people want to do them too. And then it becomes a little bit easier if you're not the only lone wolf kind of on a journey or shifting things, or shifting the paradigm. What did Kant say again? Like, there's a couple people that started. What was he on about? This is my BA in philosophy. It takes a couple of few people. They have to work really hard, and don't they die? I can't remember what he says. And then more people do it. There's only philosophy professors in the room. More people start to do it, and then it starts to flip, and then the last ones don't want to shift, and then they die. Right? Something like that. That's.
The history of the world in 8 seconds.
Yeah, but I think it's that thing of like, it does sometimes take a catalyst. And I think also like, I don't want, I've come to Latvia with, an incredibly rich contemporary space that has been making incredibly rich contemporary work for a long time, whether it had been sanctioned or not, no?
Right.
But sometimes also I know that, you know, the alien, no, me being the alien that comes in, that sometimes that can also allow for slightly different things to happen in slightly different ways. I just want to acknowledge that, you know, it's not that coming into this space, this is, I mean, the legacy of Homo Novus since '95, which is pretty cool and hardcore if you know the history of Latvia. You know, international festivals since '95. There has been an incredible amount of curators that have created the context in which this kind of work can happen. And I think that's, for me, just, I think one of the greatest pleasures and biggest honors I will ever have is being able to walk into that space and walk into that world, to inherit these structures, to inherit, you know, we have the best audience in the world. Yeah. Like, I think it's that thing of like, I just feel like the audience, the Homo Novus audience, I mean, this is going to sound, we don't need to worry about ticket sales, you know, because we have this loyal following of folks, and then also these younger generations that just discover the festival each year, and then also by expanding the program into more accessible structures, more and more people can come. I mean, we're just the luckiest, I think, Latvia is one of the luckiest festivals on earth to have this audience and to have this, supporting structure around the festival that is so protective and so loving and generous towards it. So, I mean, that was one of the main reasons I wanted to move, was meeting this audience also, like, they're awesome.
Because you went as an artist.
Yeah, so in 2018, with James Batchelor, we did our work Deep Space at Homo Novus Festival, and I had met Gundiga, the curator, previously, and I stayed for the whole week, and I was just like, what is this magical festival? You know, there was an opera in the trees at this incredible opera by Anna Kirche. Look up the Forest Opera. It's amazing because they did this full version in Finland. Insane. I think there's like baritones, like with harnesses, you know, singing from the tops of trees, and this incredible score of like 3 drum kits. That was the first show I saw in Latvia. I was like, what is this space? Like, what is this possibility of what can be seen here? And yes, there were shows in more traditional black boxes, but then there were also just these, incredible moments of connectivity and community building. And it was like, wow, like this festival is just the festival that I want to be a part of. And came back the next year. I had curated a small symposium with folks called the Possible Futures Forum, which was a group of, there was 15 of us who were future cultural leaders with no institutional power. This is the kind of criteria of, and we'd all graduated this IETM campus, which is this development thing that we've done. And it's really funny. So since then, that was 2019. Since then, many of us in that group have like stepped into positions of artistic or institutional power within the performing arts across Europe and Asia. And then I stuck around for a residency for a month, and fell deeper and deeper in love with the country before then applying for the job in 2020. True love story.
Joining on as a festival producer in 2020 is already like, you took that amazing step.
I mean, what else was there to do?
So we have about 10 minutes before we want to phase into the Q&A portion. So just wanted to open up space for things that you feel like you didn't get the chance to talk about, or like ideas to arrange.
I don't know.
Well, one of the, I don't know if it makes sense to say this or not, but one of the many reasons that when I first met you at American Realness, I just went, was that I have a secret half Australian side, and my accent's changed since I was a teenager. But that kind of trans-Pacific kind of worlding, and I was wondering how that has, what are you seeing in terms of like, what is Australian art engaging with?
Well, it's interesting, like when we met at Realness, again, it was none of these moments of like loving art and artists or audience. So I met Miguel Gutierrez and Ben Pryor in Birmingham at Fierce Festival in 2015, October. And I was meant to go back to Australia. So I had kind of had like this 4-month paid kind of residencies in the UK. I was meant to go back. And basically I was like, Ben, I'm a secret US citizen, again, another secret citizenship, secret US citizen, so I can just come move to New York if you want. And and he was like, great. So I literally moved to New York maybe I think it was 3 or 4 weeks later. And I was just super lucky, and I say that, I don't come from money or there's no spare bedroom I know in New York. It was more just total chance. I managed to get this very specific, weird Australian American grant. Australian American Association, thank you. It was very helpful to get there. So it was this very specific grant that just kind of appeared. And then I worked on Realness that first time, and it was again, it was getting closer to these artists who now I call friends and love deeply. So thinking about Montreal, that Antonia Livingston was there that year, Jennifer Lacey, Stephen Thompson, Dana Michelle. We had Keith Hennessy. Getting to know Ishmael, Houston Jones, all these dance legends, just hanging out with them, making shows. It just felt Realness was great. It never felt like this proper kind of big festival. If anyone's went to American Realness, it happened in the Lower East Side at the Henry Street Settlement at Abrams Art Center. So it was half the shows kind of happened in almost classrooms. So it's hallway. Just incredible. And it was, that was this kind of excitement. And then couldn't get work, moved back to the UK, couldn't get work, moved back to Australia. I'll try New York one more time. No, I haven't really, being in Latvia now, it's almost 2.5 years, is the longest stretch I think I've been in a country, living in a country, since 2015, which is,
it's exhausting.
It's exhausting, but also I guess there's realms of possibility, also just pursuing what feels urgent again, being on tour with James, we were just touring just non-stop, 18, 19, based kind of in Berlin and in Australia, but just touring. And that has a lot to do with the fact that if there are any independent dance artists out there, that's what you have to do to survive, this continuation. And particularly when we were young enough and our bodies were, we were young enough, our bodies were young enough to sleep on couches, and not have the perfect conditions of being artists, but yet being able to meet audiences all throughout Europe and Australia was one of the biggest privileges. But coming back to the question around this transcontinental perspectives, I was just in Australia for the first time since COVID, since 2020. And what I love about, I'm from a place called Melbourne, Australia. So just to be clear about that, I can't speak for Gadigal land up in Sydney because I don't know the artwork so well across the country. Naarm is 4 million people, so double Montreal, if we think about the perspective of numbers. And I think what's really exciting, obviously, they've had it really tough in Australia, I think more so than people realize, because a lot of us are working in Europe, and if you didn't stay in Europe, the lockdown, then there's been more than 2 years of you seeing an audience in Europe, which changes the kind of resourcing of things, That's slowly changing now. But I think what's really cool about what's happening in Australia is there is an active decolonization of process and curating. First Nations voices are finally coming to the front. Migrant voices are finally coming to the front in ways that in the last kind of 5 years, since I've been living there longer, I feel like that wasn't the case. And it's really exciting.
You told me to look up this artist, Bone Library.
S.J. Norman, who, if you're in New York, coming from live in New York, go to Performance Space. They've got an exhibition with their collaborator, Joseph, who's a Cherokee person. S.J. Norman is a trans man from Wurundjeri land. And they've got a curatorial practice called The Knowledge of Wounds. This is the 3rd iteration. You may have seen they're collaborating with First Nations artists from all over the world. This year is more focused on spoken word and poetry as well as an installation. And there are, I think, some performance initiatives. Previous years have been more performative, But S.J. Norman for me is like one of my favorite artists of all time. They know that. But again, like their perspective on how to create these structures of understanding and but also of like paying attention and like, yeah, pay attention and pay attention in the right kind of ways. But yeah, S.J. Norman, Carly Shepherd, Joel Bray. I mean, if you're interested particularly in dance practice, Black Dance, which is an Australian organisation, is a really great resource for artists, BLAK, dance. You'll meet lots of artists there. But I think this for me is like, as someone that grew up in Naarm, who, yeah, as a white person, half American, Australian migrant person, I don't know what situations here in Montreal, but I'm assuming it's quite similar. We weren't taught about Indigenous histories. We weren't taught about First Nations voices in high school, in university. We had very few figures that's not, yeah, like these mainstream figures. It's only now that there are more mainstream First Nations voices that are seen across television, performing arts, and that's really exciting. Still, they've got a huge amount of work to do, right? It's not to say that we're anywhere near where we need to be in terms of decolonizing the practice in Australia, but I feel like the difference 5 years has made has been really remarkable. It's also a really great book called The White Folks Who Want to Be Working in This Space, called Decolonization Solidarity, which is a PhD from a writer I cannot remember, but it's a really great book.
Cool.
I think that brings us just about to time. So thank you guys so much for that really rich kind of unpacking of those concepts. I wanted now to open up the space both on Zoom and in person for questions, comments, thoughts, etc. So if you have a question on Zoom, you can feel free to unmic or drop something in the chat. And if you've got a question here, raise your hand and I'll come bring the mic, so we make sure to record your voice with your smart thoughts as you have them. So questions? All right, just a sec as I walk. Oh, go back. Oh, I'm sorry. There's like a whole other microphone here. This place is fancy.
There's so many
There's
microphones.
a mic there and I have a mic. It's all good. Hi, Noah.
Hi.
Hi.
Becca, I was struck by what you said earlier, kind of in passing, about curation being 80% curation of resources and 20% curation of art. I wonder if you would speak a little bit more about that idea, experiences you had that crystallized that idea for you, and maybe if you feel like that proportion is useful, or if you'd advocate for shifting it in some way.
Cool. I mean, I think a lot of us who are working in the performing arts sector in general knows that there is never enough money, but there's also never enough time, energy, love, effort. So when we talk about resourcing, I'm not just talking about money, no? It's about people, it's about ideas, it's about community. And the reason I say that's around 80%, this is not scientific by any means. This is not well researched, but the idea that actually like what I'd want to curate is limited by all those things, no? Money, energy, effort, love, care, community, I don't know. There's a lot of those things, the resourcing of it all. So it's about actually managing what can we do, right? Not just financially, but what can I put the team through? What can I ask local artists to be a part of? What can I ask the structures, the city, like, and also thinking about, that balancing, no? In terms of voices, in terms of communities. For me, this is the hardest thing. Also, like, I've only curated 2 festivals. It sounds like a lot, but we talk about like complete structures of the festival. I've only done 2. I mean, one's in the bag, ready to go for this year. But for me, this is my experience. And maybe if I've done more, I'll get better at it. But I think most curators or people that run these kind of structures can agree. A lot of it's grant writing. A lot of it's convincing city councils that we can do that to that building. A lot of it's convincing the team that it's worth it or that we have to do it. And I think But also, yeah, the resourcing also positively, like sometimes there's too many people to care for, or, that balance. I think the artworks sometimes, well, for me anyway, it's the things that, that's the easiest part. Like the shows and the artists, that's super easy. I could probably do that in about 20 minutes, but it's the rest of it, the balancing that takes the time.
And just a quick follow-up, does that feel good and right and the way it needs to be to you?
I mean, I think that the context that I'm in is different to every other context, right? So if I was curating another festival in which I had a 20 million euro budget, it'd be very different from our budget, which is not that, not even 5% of that, no. But I think that would take away a lot of some of the thinkings that we have to do of going, if we want this artist to come, I'm going to have to write 6 more grants just to make it work. Or because we'd also try not to go negotiate with artists, that's our own personal strategy, So I don't think it's right at all. I would love it to be much easier, that a city doesn't, get rid of permits, get rid of permits, get rid of permission, everyone, I'm trying to, I was talking about my crazy idea of having just a common pool of money for the whole world for performing arts, that we can, everyone gets a card and we can all use it, there could be ways of totally getting rid of all of that. Borders, get rid of them, no work visas, there are all these structures that we have to play with in terms of making a festival or a moment. I'd love to get rid of them all, but so dream world would be 80% artists, curation, art making, 20% resourcing, but to get to that, it has to be unlimited funds, no permission, no permits, a little bit more trust and love of everything, which I can't see getting there in my lifetime, but maybe. There's also really, sorry, just to plug another great initiative. We talk about this common money. There is a project in Brussels called the Common Wallet, where 10 artists for the last 3 years have got one bank account. And it's working. Some of them have children, some of them have mortgages, some of them want to go on trips around the world, some of them have immense, amazing cocktail parties. It's incredible and a really great project to have a look at, because everyone thinks it's not possible, and then you speak to some of the artists involved, like Anna Rispoli, and she goes, well, if you change your concept of resourcing, this is my wage to do what I want to do, to, well, my wage is going to help 9 other people, and invert this kind of idea of what is possible, everything changes. And so actually your working, your labor affects 9 people, other people. So I think maybe 9 festivals want to get together. We can do it. I'm happy to hear about some ideas of sharing. And actually, talking about sharing, I can also give another example of what we're actually doing, a little bit about that. We have a project called The Festival's Path with Antti Festival, which is in a place called Kuopio, which is about 4.5 hours north of Helsinki. And our festivals happen one after the other. And the previous curator, Johanna, is a dear friend of mine, and I had kind of gone to the festival with some other artists, Maddie and Tim, who I think might be listening, in 2018. And when I took the position, I was like, Johanna, we have to do something together. Like, it'd be silly not to. And there was this work called 1,000 Ways Parts 1 by 600 Highwaymen. It's New York work. Great work on the telephone, right? We don't have any strangers. It's for 2 strangers on the phone. We don't have any strangers in Riga, and I don't have any strangers in Kuopio. So I was like, let's do something crazy and connect our audiences, but not tell them. And because wages are radically different in Latvia to Finland, we will take on an extra cost of around, I can't remember, an extra cost of, we will pay more for this project because it will cost less overall. But Johanna, you have to agree that in the future, you pay something more. No contract. I refused to sign a contract. I was like, nah, we're friends. Nah, it's not possible. I'm taking the burden. I don't need to sign a contract. No. And then Johanna was like, can I get a letter of support for this thing I'm applying for? I was like, yeah. Here's my signature, whatever. I trust you. She then went and got this very large funding from the Finnish Ministry of Culture and Education, which has now commissioned 6 works over 2 years, from the Finnish side. So it's like, it is possible with love, care and trust to also kind of change the resourcing as well. That's like this true love story of like, invest a little bit and then Finland brings 6 more works.
I love it. I want to know how those audiences talk to each other.
Well, because also, if anyone's done the work, you know how you become really, if you've done the work, so good. You basically are invited into this very intimate situation with a stranger. You're never allowed to say your name or where you're from or anything. I'm seeing some people have seen it before, yeah. But you get really intimate. This person comes in, you are asked to imagine them on your bed or on your chair or in your room. It was quite funny because some folks in Riga was like, I think they were Finnish. Like they couldn't, it was also all in English, right? We couldn't translate it to Latvian, so it had to all be in English. So yeah, I think people were quite perplexed, but we never told the audience. We were going to announce it and then we were like, no, let's just leave it as this magical thing that happens. That this weird to them, no, weird to the individual accent. So has come about. And also that thing of like, I don't think anyone in Kuopio has really ever imagined anyone in Riga. And anyone in Riga has never really imagined anyone in Kuopio. So it's also something magical that even if they didn't know who they were imagining, that actually we invited that to happen. And we have a new project this year working with children who are going to imagine the cities in both Riga and Kuopio, and then imagine what Kuopio is and imagine what Riga is to make this book, which I don't know if I'm meant to announce, but anyway, it's a wonderful work by Andy Field and Becky Darlington from the UK.
So there looks like there's a question in the chat. If you could bring that up a little bit, Max and Jax, so I can see. It says, you spoke on how it can be unsatisfying when you see work, but it feels like you don't have to be there to engage with it. What are some qualities you'd look for in an art piece or work that would encourage audience participation or ways to make something memorable?
Thanks, Nicole. I don't also always believe in audience participation, so I just want to make that clear. Though I do love a lot of that work, I think being for an artist to acknowledge an audience, there actually doesn't have to be any participation apart from acknowledge that this story is happening. And that we are in a room, and that can happen with the fourth wall very much present, very active. So my personal taste, because I think this is actually asking something more personal, is often when it's allowing oneself to exercise some sort of autonomy over the situation. And I don't mean participation, but autonomy of thought or imagination, an invitation to kind of interpret or to be in a space of wonder in that, or like non-certainty. Like that's for me, like what I just trying to think what has been really memorable recently. I think this is also really tough because I think, I don't know about you guys, but also just seeing theatre stills, because I've been wearing a lot of masks for the last week.
Yeah.
Actually having a mask has changed my way, or seeing work with masks on has really changed the way that I see work, because I feel myself too much. I can't just like become like a kind of a floating interstellar body of like, I can't just become anything. I've become a human, and I can become a human wearing a mask, where before I used to be able to transport myself into something else in theatre. But yeah, for me, it's this quality of just, I mean, I also, like, in terms of dramaturgy, you know, it's just like leaving a space for magic to happen, or like, or curiosity to be stoked and inspired. And I guess, yeah, I think that's the stuff that I mean, just thinking about also just the works that programmed in the last years, it's always been about that, like, How can we be in the live moment and be appreciated in that live moment and come out with something else, whether that's inspiration. I mean, it can even be disgust. Like it can even be this, it doesn't have to be positive, it can be completely negative. But at least if I'm in this thing together, I feel like that's, I mean, what's your opinion on this?
Well, it's weird. One of the things that's been interesting and important for me in my life of late is the last few years I've been teaching in the summers in France and at the Montpellier Festival. And this last year, the students and myself, real frustration. Like there was a real frustration building, in part because it felt like maybe these were works commissioned before COVID, or it felt like we all arrived and then something that would have happened without us happened. And then there were things that broke that pattern. And I love that place for magic to happen and curiosity to be stoked, because I think for me anyways, I like quite a lot of work that troubles, right? It's not easy work. It's not positivist, it's not trying to make this like there is already a good claim and we're going to fulfill the existing good claim. But it's asking us to maybe divest of something and maybe believe in something. And I feel like that is just maybe insurgent right now. It doesn't mean it's always what we're going to encounter. But I feel like the fact that the frame is unfamiliar is like putting the mask on and being an audience member, or it just being really, really strangely weird to walk into a room with a lot of people, which it has been. Like there are people here that I saw at festivals where, half the seats were empty and there were, 10 people in the room, but it was sold out and we had to stand 5 meters away from each other. And this estranging of the process is an opportunity, I think, for us to undo it. And, thinking back again to American Realness, like maybe that means that the audience comes in and lies on the floor and there's tap dancing in the ceiling. I'm thinking of Keon Gaskin's work that piece. Oh my God.
I love that work.
Yeah.
One night it was 25 minutes, the next night it was 75 minutes, and then it was 12 minutes. Keon Gaskin, if you don't know their work, phenomenal artist from Portland.
Yeah, and has come through Montreal quite a bit through 303 lately.
Lucky.
Yeah. So, I just think that flexibility was, when I was training, I felt like I was being narrowed into something, and I really resented it. And I feel like it's almost like the lungs are going right now for some other possibility, and I'm excited about it.
Can I show you, when we talk about the world changing, can I show you one of my favorite moments of the whole festival? So this was a super late program, and for those programmers in the room, that like there's a cutoff date, and then you've got maybe like a week before your program goes to print that you can maybe add something. And this for me was karaoke with the Baltic Drag King Collective. And this was, so the karaoke, if you don't know karaoke, you should. This is a collective between Hamburg and Berlin who basically hosts karaoke looking fabulous, giving the context in which queer joy can happen, and backup singing and backup dancing. And the invitation was for them to come and work with the Baltic Drag King Collective, who are this fierce group of Baltic drag kings, to make this one night. And initially I kind of programmed it at like 9:30 on Sunday because everything else was full, like it was super last minute. And I thought maybe 50 people would come, maybe 60 people. And then it was like 350 people.
You are welcome to participate. It's all about you, actually, and it's all about us. And we support each other, no matter if we are on stage.
Share the sound. Oh, I did this, right? Oh, I share the sound. Okay. You don't have to hear it.
Or we are the audience.
It's extraordinary. I just felt that there was a moment in there in which things happened that I didn't think were possible necessarily in our community, in terms of this freedom, in terms of folks who were both overtly queer and totally closeted, folks from the countryside who had never been in this kind of club environment. I was really, for those Black quite shy, or would say that they're shy, as a community. There was no lack of singers and dancers in that room. And sure, this doesn't look like the shiniest, most improvised, well, it's not the shiniest production of all time, but it was, yeah, for me, the most impactful work, which I think people are still referring to now at this moment in time, that changed the city in a way, that we could have this photo drive. We also sang which was also very helpful. But yeah, I think it's that thing of like, for me, I'm also like searching for these moments in which you just feel alive, no? You just feel totally alive. And I think that can happen in theatres and it can happen in more engaged spaces. I remember seeing Jaha Ku's Lolling and Rolling, which is this, which was at last year's festival, which is just this incredible look at learning English at the same time of telling the whole South Korean war history, you know, like incredible piece of theatre. And you know, you see something so phenomenal, you just can't, you're waiting to stand up at the end because you just feel like you've seen something that was important, that made you feel like you somehow got to learn a little bit more about humanity and a human. And I think that's the thing that I'm looking for. And unfortunately, I feel like it doesn't happen nearly as much as it should. And that's all of our problems, I think.
Look, you're shit stirring. I like it.
Oh no, I'm going to lose my job.
So we have about 10, 12 minutes left. Oh, we have a raised hand for a question in the back there. We could grab that.
I really enjoyed hearing about your definition of dramaturgy, and I was wondering if maybe you could expand a little bit more on how your relationship to dramaturgy has like changed and more from being like the creator of a project to being in more of a curatorial role and knitting together a variety of different artists and performances.
Thanks. Yeah, I don't know. It's really different because I think my work with James, it's like a different world of dramaturgy. And you would have seen photos of James. He has like a typical muscular dance body. Our work is really highly technical dance. So it's all those things we're talking about, this sticky between thing is the political. It really, the work is dealing with the distance of atoms most of the time. We're diving deep into these like really quite conceptual technical things. So for me, that's a really different practice working with James than working with communities or ideas. For me, they're completely different. Because when working with James, yeah, some of the structures, particularly with our teaching, maybe the kind of curator comes out a little bit more, but actually with that dance dramaturgy, it's very much like, no, what are the elements to give an audience a way into this specificity of movements, or like how does that gesture change to that gesture, you know, like it's maybe not so interesting. But I think when we talk about curatorial, or like this kind of this dramaturgy of trying to make these spaces, right? It's always about equity, it's about love, it's about generosity, and also trying to create spaces in which people can discover things. Because that's like a moment of discovery is where you could actually change yourself. No, if you're in this moment of being dictated to or told how to do something, if you don't get the moment of discovering an idea or discovering a concept or discovering a community, it will never be adopted in one. Well, I believe this is my idea that you can never possibly adopt that into your everyday life and your forever. So you have to get moments of discovery. So there is a lot of, well, this attempted softness, it's not always the case, no, and I like this concept of hospitality. So like really just trying to find this way of being welcomed in. There was a really great review for the festival last year, this like long form review, in which was this didn't feel like a festival. It felt like being invited into a new community. And some of the theatre people were like, I'm so sorry you got this review. And I was like, this is the best review of all time. For me, this is exactly what, I think a theatre I think every festival should be that. I think personally, or that's what I want, I think just because, we're a theatre festival, contemporary theatre festival, it doesn't mean that we just have to be wearing nice outfits and going and drinking champagne at night times, that we can actually be exercising a different type of community building and being together. And I think it's probably important to know that we're really, in Latvia, maybe what's most extraordinary, so you're here in Montreal, lots of festivals, lots of contexts. We're really the largest international festival in the whole country. So there's also a radicality in also what we're bringing into this space and have been since '95. This is not a new stream of consciousness. This has been like this the whole way. So it's not like where you have your Lepages and your Robert Wilsons. Lepage and Robert Wilsons have come, but Castellucci's come quite a few times and things like that. But it's also about how to kind of find those other spaces in between as well. Did that answer that question? I don't even know.
That was great. Thank you so much. Also, just for my brain, what was the name of the piece with the telephones?
1,000 Ways Part 1 by a company called 600 Highwaymen. They're based in New York. There's also 1,000 Ways Part 2, and I just saw 1,000 Ways Part 3 finally in New York last week. So the trilogy is now complete. But they make really super interesting work, and if you can see that phone call work, for me, I saw it twice, and each time I had a great time. And then being able to program it was a real honor, because it was great to know that even though this is a one-on-one work, it infects the city. I can talk about one-on-one works forever. We had a breastfeeding work my first year called Nurture by an incredible Finnish artist called Samuli Lane. And this was, I thought, my most radical programming, having a work where you're breastfed by a male in 21. I had done it in 2020, and I feel like that was the most radical action I did in 2020, doing this one-on-one work, being breastfed by this man in a gallery. But this was, again, that changed the whole festival, because we had only 35 people get to see the work, but people kept recalling this incredible tenderness, or there was also a situation of disgust as well, but that having these intimate, singular one-on-one moments shifts the whole festival landscape. For me, I do love having at least one-on-one work within the festival body. Maybe not everyone can see it, it's like limited, but it still shifts what happens in the city or in the festival.
I also love not having any idea what size an audience will be until you're there. Like, I remember being really late for a piece. Benoit Lachon was performing in it, but I think it was Boris Chalmets. And I was racing across town because I felt so bad to be late, and as with a one-on-one piece, but then the performer was never there. You could sort of, so it was like this strange way in which your expectations of what it is to meet somebody get distorted by the program possibility or absence altogether. It's kind of magic, and there is a strangeness about not being able to see a piece that you recall as much as sometimes what you could see.
I also, my favorite one-on-one piece, sorry, I'm just gonna be like, I quite like seeing talks where people actually talk about works. A work called Floaters by a Milan-based company called Macau, which was in Santa Cangelo Festival in it was the before times, where you were invited into this abandoned cinema with kind of a giant rock on stage. Then the rock opened up and it was actually a sensory deprivation tank. And you were invited to get naked and have a shower. And then this beautiful person, long hair, kind of invited you to get into this tank on this stage in this empty cinema. And then 45 minutes you're in this thing. But if you've done these sensory deprivation tanks, you know, like you lose all space, time, everything. And kind of came out of that work and got into the changing area, and you see that actually everything around is like rest as resistance. Rest as resistance, this like protest piece of just resting for an hour, and then like leaving the cinema and kind of going into the real world. I could not speak to anyone for like 4 hours because I was so relaxed. I was like, this is the best festival piece of all time. I mean, I think 16 people got to do it in the whole festival. Like, it was also quite felt quite indulgent. But floaters, this is really one of my all-time favorites.
Well, I think that actually brings us pretty close up against time. So I think maybe rest as a prompt to allow you guys to rest for a minute and take a break. I think I've been getting signals that we need to wrap it up, but maybe if there's a brief observation or anything from the audience before we, anything? No? Okay.
I'd say a thank you to you.
Yes, thanks. This is so nice.
Well, no, this is very nice that you guys are here. So thank you guys for coming. Yes, clapping, clapping, clapping. Yay!
Such a
All the
pleasure.
clapping. Thank you so much for coming through. Thanks so much, VK, for your time. Thank both of you for your time.
It's so nice.
Thanks for our audience here and on Zoom. And hopefully folks will also enjoy the recording of this in the future. You're getting lots of thanks in the Zoom as well. People are very grateful.
Thanks, guys.
So yeah, thank you guys so much, and keep an eye out for the next talk, which is February 6th with Rasa Smite, in conversation with also Concordia faculty Alice Jerry. So very exciting.
She's one of the smartest people on earth, so I would highly, highly recommend. Incredibly talented individual. So yes.
More brilliant brains. Thanks, guys. Yay.
Thanks, Mom.